imagine not having the resource of Iowa Public Television, because it's so daily in use in the teaching and lesson plans that I develop, that being without it would be a handicap that I don't think I'd want to go through.
For more information about IPTV's educational services, call 800-532-1290 or visit our website at iptv.org.
Hi, and welcome to Assignment the World for the week of March 16th. I'm Tiege Jenkins. Our top story this week, a major setback for President Bush.
Dubai Ports World has stepped away from a deal that would have had it operate 6 major U.S. shipping ports. The plan had the full backing of the president, but had angered many in Congress on both sides of the political aisle. DP World's top executive announced that it will transfer all of its U.S. operations to an entity in this country. Republicans in Congress said they were relieved by the move. The announcement will also apparently end a potential standoff between the president and many in his own party. A House committee had voted overwhelmingly to block the deal, and sources say the Senate was poised to do the same. Though the issue is apparently over, some feel the controversy was unnecessary. General John Abazai claims the deal was essentially Arab and Muslim bashing, and that Dubai, which owns DP World, could have been trusted to run secure operations.
Iran is a nation with an area slightly larger than Alaska. Known as Persia until 1935, its 68 million people are bordered by the Caspian Sea, the Persian Gulf, Iraq, Pakistan, and the Gulf of Oman.
In the rest of the news this week, a heart attack claims the butcher of Belgrade, warmer times mean long-lasting change in the Arctic, and international pressure continues on Iran.
Iran is showing no signs of bowing to international pressure to halt its nuclear program. Iran insists it has only peaceful intentions, but the U.S., Britain, and France claim Iran has been trying to build a nuclear weapon for years. The UN Security Council continues to meet on the situation after it was referred there by the UN's watchdog group, the International Atomic Energy Agency. The UN can impose sanctions on Iran, steps that could include a ban on the sale of Iranian oil. That could cripple Iran's economy, as that country gets 80% of its export earnings from oil. A spokesman from the Iranian Foreign Ministry said they will wait to see what the Security Council decides before taking further steps. Even in death, Slobodan Milosevic remains a controversial figure. The former president of Serbia died from an apparent heart attack over the weekend. He was found dead in his prison cell at The Hague. Milosevic had been on trial for the past 4 years. He faced 66 counts of genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes for his role in the Balkan War of the 1990s. The so-called Butcher of Belgrade had claimed he was being poisoned and had asked to go for treatment in Moscow. That request had been denied. While autopsy results were still being assembled, his burial location caused a political upheaval back in Serbia. Serbia's current president rejected calls for a state funeral for Milosevic. Warmer air and seawater temperatures could have dire consequences for both animals and humans in the Arctic's Bering Sea. A team of U.S. and Canadian researchers found that biological changes in the region could have long-term and irreversible effects. The northern Bering Sea provides a critical home for large populations of sea ducks, whales, seals, and walruses. All of those depend on small, bottom-dwelling creatures for food. Those creatures are moving to where temperatures are colder and the ice cap is more prominent. That will force both larger animals and the humans who depend on them to also go further north. Temperatures have risen in the Arctic in recent decades at twice the rate of the rest of the world. Many scientists blame greenhouse gases that come from automobiles and factories.
In our story about Slobodan Milosevic, in which country did we tell you he was once president? Is it Croatia, Bosnia, Serbia? And the answer is number 3. The late Slobodan Milosevic was once president of Serbia.
It is now time for the answer to our clues in the news. Our first clue is the location of Santiago, Chile. That's where celebrations were held over the weekend surrounding the inauguration of Michelle Bachelet as the new president of Chile. Bachelet is the first woman to lead that nation, and she has promised to make government more accessible to all Chileans. Her first act was to name a cabinet with equal numbers of men and women, a first in Chilean history. Bachelet is the daughter of an Air Force general who was tortured and died in prison for opposing the 1973 military coup of General Augusto Pinochet. Unscramble the letters of our second clue, and you got Mars Orbiter. Scientists cheered the successful arrival of the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter Friday. The 2-ton spacecraft will spend the next 4 years in low orbit over the red planet, reporting about climate, landscape, and where water might once have been. The orbiter will also scout locations for possible landing sites where future robotic or human missions might begin. The mission cost more than $700 million. The orbiter arrived after a journey of 7 months and 310 million miles. And finally, fill in the blanks of our third clue, and you got rice in Peru. U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice touched down in Peru, Chile, Australia, and Indonesia on an extended trip. Security was the focus of talks at each stop. Rice called the Asia-Pacific area region in tremendous flux and change, primarily because of China's rise to power. China has become the 3rd largest trading nation in the world and has the world's largest standing army. Secretary Rice also attended the inauguration of Chile's new president, Michelle Bachelet.
This week in world history, March 16, 1827, Freedom's Journal becomes the first newspaper published and written by African Americans. Over the next 2 years, it attracted readers in 11 states, Haiti, Europe, and Canada. It was largely banned in the South.
Attending school was a much different experience in the 1800s than it is today. A unique summer camp at the Genesee Country Village and Museums gives its students a look into a schoolroom of yesterday. Katie Sullivan checks it out.
When they weren't making toys or playing games, the kids could be found in the museum's one-room schoolhouse, experiencing 19th century lessons. Forget computers, calculators, or even your trusty number 2 pencil. Schools back then used only the basics.
We practiced our cursive on our slates because you wouldn't have gotten to write on your paper until it was ready on your slates because paper was expensive, and then once they were done, they got their quills. We gave them spelling words that had to do with the museum, and they studied them, and we had a spelling bee on Thursday. They had recess in the middle of the day, and they played simple games that they would have invented themselves, or they would have played with their dolls that they had made, or their bean bags, or there's a game you can play with a puff of wool, and simple games that they could have made themselves.
Having to instruct children of all different ages at once, a teacher in the 1800s was forced to use some teaching methods that these campers were not used to.
She would have signed like a specific lesson to, say, the 2nd graders, and they would have worked on it while she maybe taught the 1st graders. And in the front of the room, we have a recitation bench, so whoever turn it was to present their lesson to the teachers would have come up and sat in the recitation bench and done it for the teachers. And then the other kids would be working on math or spelling or reading, whatever they had been assigned. And sometimes the older kids would help the younger kids if they'd finished their lessons early. Usually there was about 80 children registered, but between 30 to 60 would show up on any given day. And it would have been hard to manage an entire room of kids.
All in all, their week spent participating in the Genesee Country Village and Museum Summer Camp offered campers a fun and unique learning experience that couldn't be gotten from 20th century schools and textbooks.
Chinese television recently broadcast pictures of a group of giant pandas playing in the snow. The pandas are part of a research project where the pandas, separated from their mothers, live and play together as a group. The 16 pandas range in age from 7 months to 5 years. A nurse at the center said the pandas would eventually be split into 2 groups. Some will be used for breeding, and the others will be released back into the wild.
This week is the 2nd annual Sunshine Week, 7 days during which newspapers and other media outlets highlight what they see as the need for open government. Andy Alexander of Cox Newspaper says the issue should concern all Americans. He says an alarming amount of public information is being kept secret from citizens, and the problem is increasing by the month. Not only do citizens have a right to know, they have a need to know. The Freedom of Information Act came into being 40 years ago. Then, as now, the idea was that the only way the public has to keep government accountable is to have access to how and why decisions are made. Backers say it empowers the public and improves government. But in the wake of 9/11, government at nearly every level sought to restrict access to information. More than 1,000 new laws have been passed, prompted by concerns that terrorists or computer hackers can misuse public information. Identity theft, medical privacy, vulnerable compute records, plans for nuclear plants, and records for bridges and transportation systems are things that some legislators say could easily fall into the wrong hands. So what do you think? Does the public have the right to know everything? Discuss this issue with your classmates after the show, and then write to us with your opinions. We received nearly 300 responses to our issue question, should the United States approve the UAE port deal? The majority of you, 68%, say no, the deal should not be approved. 22% say yes, it should. 10% are undecided. Many of you feel that fear of foreign control of our ports is the tip of the iceberg. Mitchell B. of Grand Rapids, Michigan writes, America is acting like every person in the Middle East is a terrorist, which is not true. Lauren P. of Waverly, Iowa adds, if we don't, we are just being prejudiced. If we let the British run one, it would not be fair if we didn't let the UAE run one. And Nicole H. of Staunton, Virginia believes we need to trust our president. Nicole writes, I think President Bush knows what he is doing. We don't have to worry. The majority of you, however, agrees with your congressional leaders and is not in favor of the UAE running our ports. Elizabeth F. of Kohler, Wisconsin writes, I think if our country's ports are owned and operated by foreign people, it could make it easier for bombs and terrorists to enter our country. Ann W. of Churchville, Virginia adds, the UAE support the terrorists we're trying to keep out of our country. Kayla V. of Waynesboro, Virginia believes there is too much of a risk. Kayla writes, I do not think it is safe for foreign countries to run our ports. And finally, Eric J. of Pittsford, New York thinks it might be okay, but with some reservations. Eric writes, I do not think they can be trusted, but they do deserve a chance. We should have twice as much security as before. We look forward to your responses to our two latest questions. Does the public have the right to know everything? And should soda have warning labels? If you would like to receive an Assignment the World press card, please enclose a self-addressed stamped envelope. You may write to us here at Assignment the World, Post Office Box 30021, Rochester, New York 14603, or contact our ATW website at atwonline.org. We also read email at atw@wxxi.org.
In our story about Michelle Bachelet, where did we tell you she will serve as president? Peru, Chile, Argentina. And the correct answer is number 2. Michelle Bachelet is the first woman president of Chile.
And now it is time for next week's Clues in the News. Our first clue, a location. 19 degrees, 24 minutes north latitude, 99 degrees, 9 minutes west longitude. Our second clue is a scrambled letter, 3 words. First word, H-I-S-I-R. Second word, M-E-R-I-P. Third word, M-I-R-E-S-N-I-T. And finally, our third clue is a fill in the blanks, 3 words. First word, W blank, R blank, D. Second word, B blank, S blank, B blank, L blank. Third word, C blank, A blank, S blank, C. These are clues to stories we think will happen in the coming week. You can find the answers on radio and television newscasts and in newspapers and news magazines. We'll reveal the answers on next week's show. Good luck. And that's it for this week's show. From all of us here at Assignment the World, I'm Tish Jenkins, and we'll see you again next week.